Family and heritage has encouraged us to try and follow our Lee ancestors from their beginning in the 1700s, when it is believed they came from England to settle in Virginia, and later, following the American Revolution, migrated to Kentucky. John Lee I was born in Flavarrion County, Virginia in the early 1700s, the son of William and Dorothy Lee. His father, William, was a son of Henry Lee, who was a brother to Colonel Richard Lee of Richmond, Virginia. John Lee I married Lucy Page, and they had at least 4 children: John Lee II, Stephen, Benjamin, and a daughter, Deborah, who married John Hodges. We are descended from their son, Stephen Lee, who was born in Goochland County, Virginia in 1743. The Douglas Register lists his marriage there on the 3rd of November, 1763, to Miss Ann Poor, daughter of Thomas and Elizabeth Poor. To this union was born 10 children: Thomas, Braxton, Louis, Mildred, Elizabeth, Lucy, Esther, Jubilee, Seton, and Andrew. Stephen Lee was a Revolutionary War patriot. Stephen Lee is listed in A History of Henry County, Virginia, written by Judith Parks, America Hill, as one of its most prominent citizens, and on page 323 as having helped with the American Revolution by furnishing provisions for the Continental Army. This makes any of his direct descendants eligible for membership in the DAR. Shortly before the turn of the century, Stephen and wife Ann left Virginia with their family and traveled over the Wilderness Trail through the Cumberland Gap in the Blue Ridge Mountains to settle on land in Kentucky. They owned many acres of land in Pulaski County, Kentucky, and they were farmers. They raised their children and lived and died in Pulaski County, Kentucky. Stephen died in 1809, and Ann followed him in death in 1911. Their children inherited many acres of land along with 10 slaves, not to be sold out of the family. Records of Pulaski County, Kentucky, 1816 will. Her son, Seton, born in Goochland County, Virginia in 1778, and moved with the family to Kentucky. He married Rhoda Mayfield in 1798. They were landowners and farmers. To this union was born 8 children: John E., Preston Mayfield, Stephen, Polly, Elizabeth, Permelia, Permetta, and Seton. Their son, Preston Mayfield Lee, born February the 7th, 1807, and married Jane Hay. She was born 30th of July, 1812, the daughter of Peter Hay. They lived in Metcalfe County and had 2 sons and 1 daughter. John Jackson Lee, born October 1833, James Gabriel, July 15, 1836, and Julie Ann. John J. Lee died March 14, 1872, and Preston Mayfield died March 1884. They're buried in the Lee Cemetery on Highway 70 west of Suffolk Wells in Metcalfe County, Kentucky, on the Everett Russell farm. Inscribed on his marker is "Came from Virginia, settled on this spot of ground, lived and died here." John Jackson Lee, son of Preston Mayfield Lee, was born in October of 1833 in Metcalfe County. He married Louisa Sophrina Curry on 12th of March, 1854. She was the daughter of William Curry and Martha Miner, born 18th of January, 1834 in Greene County, Kentucky. They were the parents of 10 children: Martha Jane, Mary Susan, William Preston, Silas Edward, Pleasant Green, Stephen, Narcissus, Viola, James Ira, and Joseph Newton, and Elizabeth Ellen. The picture shows, front row, William Preston, John Jackson, Silas Edward. The back row, Joseph Newton, who was the principal of the First Greensburg High School, Stephen Lewis, and Pleasant Green. John and Sophorina lived in Greene and Metcalfe counties. They farmed and raised their family there. They were members of the Greasy Creek Baptist Church. We have obtained a copy of the records from the church that states Sophorina Lee was a charter member, being number 17 on the charter roll. Her sisters were also charter members. The record also states that John Lee was also a member and a deacon. Sophorina was the last of the original members. Her death is recorded as May the 22nd, 1923. John died the 27th of June, 1905. Some of the McKinneys would remember Sophorina. Audie McKinney Shelton was born on her birthday and remembers going to her home and celebrating their birthdays together on January the 18th, 1922. We are descended from their son, William Preston, born April the 24th, 1859, who married Louisa Whitlock, September the 5th, 1878. She was the daughter of James Henry Whitlock and Mary Susan Craddock. They live in Exie, Greene County, Kentucky, farmed and raised their family of 9 children. They were Laura Jane, Viola, Harvey, Louise, James Jackson, Waller, Lucy, Annabelle, and Mariah. The picture shown now is of Louise E. Whitlock's parents, James Henry Whitlock and Mary Susan Craddock. Next is a family picture of their children. Back row, Louise, Harvey, Viola, and Laura. The front row, James Jackson, the father William Preston, Waller, the mother Louise, and Lucy. William Preston Lee and Louisa E. Whitlock Lee lived all their lives on a farm at Exie, Greene County, Kentucky. They were Baptists and members of Greasy Creek Baptist Church. He was a deacon in this church, as was his brother Silas and his father John. Louisa Whitlock died in childbirth on September 16, 1899. William Preston married a second wife, Martha S. Negley, November the 20th, 1901, the daughter of Andrew and Rebecca Negley. William Preston Lee died in 1902 before the birth of their son, William Alexander Lee, born October the 5th, 1902. They are both buried in the Lee Cemetery at Exie, Kentucky. Viola Frances Lee, second child of William Preston and Louisa E., met and married P.C. Pack Harlow in Greene County, Kentucky on November the 19th, 1899. They were the first of the Lee family to migrate to Grayson County, Texas, settling there in 1902 in the Carpenter's Bluff area. They went to Texas by train with their first son, Preston Taylor Harlow. 4 more children were born to them: Nellie, Vernon, Ella, Buford. They owned and operated the grocery store at Carpenter's Bluff for many years. Next to arrive in Grayson County, Texas, was Harvey in 1904. He was a blacksmith and also farmed in the Carpenter's Bluff community. He married Ethel Floyd on November the 30th, 1909. They had 5 sons and 2 daughters: Roscoe, Arnold, Arthur, Jewel, Annie Pearl, and Hetty. They raised their family and lived there all their lives. James Jackson Lee, brother to Harvey Lee and Viola Harlow, went to Texas from Kentucky in 1908. He farmed with his brother and on September the 27th, 1910, married Laura Grisby. To this union was born 3 children: Alma, Ruth, and Cleet Lee. Their mother, Laurie, died in 1923. In later years, James J. married Vaughn Walker. They had 1 daughter, Mary Lou. They lived in Denison, and James worked for the MKT Railroad for many years until he retired. He died in 1957 and is buried in Cedar Lawn Cemetery, Denison, Texas. The fourth child of William Preston and Louisetta Lee was also the fourth member of the family to move to Texas. Louisa Ann Lee had been attending the Kentucky School for the Blind in Louisville, and upon graduation came by MKT train to Denison and was met at the depot by her brothers, Harvey and James Lee. She lost her eyesight in an accident at the age of 16. She entered the Kentucky School for the Blind at Louisville on February the 14th, 1904, and graduated with honors June the 8th, 1909, receiving a degree in music. She became a music teacher. She lived with her sister and brothers until her marriage on December the 14th, 1910, to Perry Willis Sweeney. He was a widower with two young sons, Perry Alvin, who lives in Pineless Park, Florida, and Henry Clay Sweeney, who after retirement in Indiana moved back to Denison in 1970 and died August the 20th, 1979. 4 children were born to Perry Willis and Louise Ann Sweeney: Clara Mae Smith, Josephine Pate of Denison, Mary Rosa Lee of Shackletown, Texas, and Carl Grant, who died at an early age. In 1910, Ina Bell Lee went from Kentucky to Texas and lived with her brothers and sisters until her marriage to John Daniels in 1912. They lived in Carpenter's Bluff area for many years before moving to Denver, Colorado. They had 7 children: Edith, Agnes, Charles, Carl, Clyde, Marie, and Ina Mae Daniels. John and Ina Lee Daniels both died and are buried in Denver, Colorado. Most of their children live in and around Denver. Maria was the 6th and last of the Lee family to move to Texas. She went in 1921 with her son Estel Young. She married Earl Young in Kentucky, and they were divorced in 1920. She came to live with her sister Louisa Lee Sweeney, but did not stay long in Texas. She returned to Illinois in 1925, and in 1925 married Glenn R. McClure of Danville, Illinois. They live in Danville and had 2 children, Alva Preston and Jareen. Maria Louise Lee McClure resided in Phoenix, Arizona in her later years. Waller Lyle Lee married Della Carter in 1909, and they had 10 children: Carter, Garnet, Haskell, Opal, Regina, Justine, Imogene, William, Alma, and Orville. He was a Methodist minister and lived in Kentucky. After Della died, he married Ruby Jennings. They were married about 10 years before Walla died. Ruby died 2 days before her 96th birthday in May of 1990. Sarah Jane Lee was the oldest child. She married Robert McKinney in 1897. It is believed that the McKinneys came to Virginia from Ireland in the early 1700s and then migrated to Kentucky. Peter McKinney married Peggy Ann Henderson, who was born August the 29th, 1823. They lived in Little Barron community, where they gave birth to 6 girls and 1 boy. Willie Wood Schrader, shown here in a picture with Nellie McKinney Coomer, had 3 daughters: Hallie Wade, Callie Slinker, and Valerie Slinker. Maria Louise Lee, shown in the picture with her young grandson, is Robert's aunt. She married Laura's uncle, Green Lee. The 3rd child of Peter and Peggy's was Nanny Goen. The 4th was Hasteltine Kelsler, and the 5th was Sadie Judd. Martha McKinney was their 6th child. The picture shows Martha's son Leslie, his wife Maggie, and Robert and Laura McKinney. Martha had a grandson, Finus, a great-grandson, Ogden, and a great-great-grandson, William Carl. Their 7th child was a son, William Robert McKinney, born 1862. He was reared in Little Barron community and married Mary Frances Atwell. Mary Frances was the daughter of Joel Atwell. She died young, leaving a small son, Robert Bruin. His dad, William, later married Amanda Baird Negley. Joel Atwell's other children were James, Bill, Lonnie, Ben, Tom, George Green. James's children were Mary, Lonnie, Shackford, and Quentin. Ben's children were Valor, Doss, and Rilda. Valor, Ben's daughter, married David Curry. They had 4 children, Clifford, Irma, Molly, and Brian. Shown is a picture of Lucille and Walter Nassett. Lucille is the daughter of Brian. Robert Bruin had no brothers and sisters, so he thought of his cousins and Laura's family as being his. Shown in the picture are Valor and David Curry's children, Clifford, Irma, Molly, and Brian. Clifford later married Mossy and became Robert's son-in-law. Another picture we have is of Robert and Laura and Albert and Rhoda Judd. Rhoda's and Robert's mothers were sisters. Laura and Robert were also good friends with Eugene and Lenny Atwell. Robert's mother was a sister to Eugene's dad. William Robert McKinney died in 1927. He, along with his 2 wives, are buried in the Atwell Cemetery in Pierce, Kentucky. A picture of Mossy is shown at the Atwell Cemetery. Robert Bruin McKinney and Laura Jane Lee were married at the home of the bride's parents, Mr. and Mrs. William Preston Lee, on October the 27th, 1894, by W.L. Pierce. Robert was a farmer and 19 years old. Laura was 18 years of age. Shown is a copy of their marriage certificate. Also, there is a copy of a marriage bond required by the Commonwealth of Kentucky. It states, "Be it known that we, R.B. McKinney as principal and W.R. McKinney as surety, are jointly and severally bound to the Commonwealth of Kentucky in the sum of $100. The condition of this bond is as follows, that whereas marriage is intended to be solemnized between the above bound R.B. McKinney and Laura Jane Lee, now if there is no lawful cause to obstruct said marriage, this bond shall be void, otherwise it shall remain in full force and effect. Dated at Greensburg, Kentucky, this 26th day of October, 1897, and signed by R.B. McKinney and his father, W.R. McKinney." Louisa Whitlock Lee, Laura's mother, died in childbirth just 6 years after Laura married. Laura and Robert helped to rear many of Laura's brothers and sisters. Sometimes there were as many as 4 of them living with them. Waller was only 9 years of age when his mother died. He said he felt more like Laura was his mother rather than a sister. Robert and Laura moved several times in their early married lives. They lived in Adair and Taylor counties, also in Danville, Illinois, and in 1927 settled back in Greene County at the McKinney family farm where they lived most of their married life. Robert and his dad went into the sawmill business, a business which Robert continued after his dad's death. One day while Robert was at the sawmill, a traveling photographer came by. He took Robert's picture. Robert paid him and told him to go by his home and make a picture of his family. Pictured are Austin, Laura, Holden Oddie, Mossy, Ethel, and Eugene. Robert's sons also helped at the sawmill as they grew up. The picture shows Robert, Eugene, and Austin at break time. Photography was limited in the early years of their life, but they used every opportunity to keep a record of their family and events through pictures. The picture shown here is one of Robert, Laura, Ethel, and Mossy. The next picture was made after Audie joined the family. It shows Ethel, Mossy, and Audie. They're all dressed up in their Sunday best. The McKinney family liked to travel. In 1914, they traveled to the State Fair in Louisville, Kentucky. Shown in the front row, Austin, Mossy, Audie, and Eugene. Back row, Ethel, James Bishop, a man who worked for Robert, and Laura and Robert. They believed in having a time set each year for the family to get together. This picture of Robert and Laura and their children was made in 1937. Front row, Nellie, Robert, Laura, and Woodrow. Back row, Mossy, Audie, Austin, Ethel, and Eugene. This is a picture made the same year of their children and their mates. Front row, John and Ethel Keyes, Nellie and Ernest Coomer, Austin and Cecil McKinney. Back row, Clifford and Mossy Curry, Nancy and Eugene, and Audie Shelton. Hugh, Audie's husband, was unable to make the reunion. And Helen, Woodrow's wife, had not joined the McKinney family yet. This is a picture of the grandchildren who had made their appearance into the world by 1937 and were present at the reunion. Robert and Laura celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1947. They just liked about 1 month being able to celebrate their 65th. This is a picture of Robert and Laura in 1960. Robert died in 1962. Laura continued to be a beautiful lady even as the wrinkles began to show her age. She lived about 10 years after Robert's death. Robert and Laura had 7 children: Ethel, Mossy, Austin, Eugene, Audie, Nellie, and Woodrow. Ethel was born January the 5th, 1899 in Pierce, Kentucky. When she became old enough to join the public workforce, she moved to Danville, Kentucky, where she obtained work in a canning factory. She moved to Louisville about 1927 to work at a textile company and later took a position at the Enro Shirt Company. By the year 1930, she had met a young man who had been working in Oklahoma. He moved to Louisville to work at Reynolds Aluminum, where he retired from several years later. Ethel put into writing one of the most important decisions of her life. It read, "Mr. and Mrs. Robert McKinney of Pierce, Greene County, Kentucky, announces the marriage of their daughter, Ethel Francis, to Mr. John D. Keyes, Louisville, Kentucky, son of Mr. and Mrs. J.W. Keyes, Lodyburg, Breckinridge County, Kentucky, on Saturday, May 31st, 1930, by Reverend M.P. Hunt, at home, 2909 Magazine Street, Louisville, Kentucky." Ethel quit her job and started cooking for boarders. Her job again changed to cooking and caring for a family when Catherine Jane joined their family September the 25th, 1931. Soon after Donald Joe arrived on February the 12th, 1934, the family moved to Lodyburg, the town where John was born. After 3 years, in 1937, they moved to another farm at Valley Station. It was here on July the 21st, 1938, that another little girl, Annie Carolyn, joined the family. After a short move in 1939 to a Pleasant Ridge farm, they decided to head back to Lodyburg. So in 1940, their roots began to sink in. Ethel taught the junior boys and girls Sunday school class for many years and then graduated to teaching the adult ladies class. She taught it until her health wouldn't permit her to attend church. John was fire guard, Sunday school superintendent for 8 years, and magistrate for 12 years of District 4 of Breckinridge County. John and Ethel received an appreciation award for preparing communion, the Lord's Supper, for 45 years. Ethel's hobbies were working with flowers and doing handwork. In 1980, Ethel and John celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Ethel passed away March 19, 1984. John and Ethel have 3 children, 12 grandchildren, 13 great-grandchildren. Catherine Jane Keyes married George R. French. They have 7 children: Larry Dale, Gary Lee, Michael Reese, Philip Ray, Marcus Wade, Catherine Rena, and Anita Jane. Larry Dale French married Carol Peace. They have 2 children, Joshua Dale and Carolyn Nicole. Gary Lee French married Joyce Priest. They have 1 son, Gary Lee Jr. Michael Reese French married Eugenia Carter, and they have 1 daughter, Milana Michelle. Philip Ray French married Diane Underwood. They have 2 children, John Eric and Jason Ray. Marcus Wade French married Anita Miller. They have 2 children, Kenneth Hendricks and Robert Wade. Catherine Rena French married Gary Rainey. They have 2 children, Derek Lewis and David Reese.
Okay, stand by.
Anita Jane French married Wayne McCurley. They have 1 child, Alexander. Donald Joe Keyes, son of Ethel and John, married Mary Lou Basham. They have 2 children, Terry Lewis Keyes and Dale Curtis Keyes. Annie Carolyn Keyes, daughter of John and Ethel, married Jim Albright. They have 3 children, Gerald David, John Darrell, and Susan Carroll. Gerald David married Barbara Phillips. John Darrell married Vicki Hall. Susan Carroll married Jerry McCurley. They have 1 daughter, Evelyn. Annie Carolyn and Jim Albright have another granddaughter, Ashley. Mossy was born July 26, 1901, and in 1 month and 19 days she met a person who became very important in her life. On September the 14th, 1901, her mother, Laura, took her to a neighbor's house, laid her on the foot of a bed, and helped deliver a baby boy. They named the baby Clifford Elwood Curry. 17 years and 8 days from that month, Clifford and Mossy went to Gallatin, Tennessee, and became husband and wife. Mossy and Clifford lived in Kentucky, Indiana, and Wyoming. In August 1937, they moved to Danville, Illinois, where they spent the rest of their life. Mossy worked in a coat factory and then became a seamstress for a local tailor shop where she worked for several years. One of the special times for her was when little Jimmy Dickens was in Danville and bought some suits at a local clothing store. He brought the suits to her to be shortened. She saved the pieces from the suit and made a pillow top as a memento of the occasion. Mossy liked getting together with her brothers and sisters. When she and her sisters would get together, they would stay up late at night talking about the people they knew and the things they did when they were young. Mossy had a good sense of humor, loved to hear and tell a joke, liked to travel, always ready to go by bus, train, air, car, wagon, you name it. She always had a great time. She liked flowers, Her favorite houseplant was the African violet, and her outdoor favorite was the big sunflower. Clifford and Mossy celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary September the 22nd, 1968, before Clifford passed away in January